last class, we began chapter 2. How do we make a good moral decision? We first had to emphasize the fact that we can, that we are capable, and our decisions do impact our lives, and they do shape who we are. It gives us responsibility. If we don't have freedom, we don't have morality. We have no ability to love. Very good. We basically become robots. Robots are becoming smarter. All right. It looks like there's no questions related to last class. Today we're going to examine different types of freedom. What we're going to call interior and exterior freedom. So we're going to define exactly what it is. Last class is like we have it, but what does it exactly look like? What is authentic freedom? And we're going to focus on one specific catechism paragraph today. Freedom is the power rooted in reason and will to do this or that. And so to perform deliberate actions, making you responsible. So this first kind of freedom defined here is what I'm going to call an external freedom. And what it is like I have underlined, it's a power, it's an ability. It's the performance, the doing part. You know, we are free in America, right? So we have freedom of speech. It's an external action. It's a liberty. It's a license, largely, this external freedom. Okay. So I mentioned the freedom of speech. What other freedoms can you name that we are entitled to, that we claim for ourselves in America? Freedom of religion. You can go to whatever church, temple, synagogue, mosque, or no church at all. You're free to worship, free to practice your religion. Also, that one's a little bit more under threat nowadays. Freedom. What else? In America, we are free to freedom of the press, assemble. Very good. Y'all learned this in civics. There's a few others at least. Speech I mentioned. Freedom to protest, I believe. And so we have all these outward actions that we're proud of, and that for freedom to vote. And while America has perhaps not a complete day in her life exercise these freedoms perfectly, or given them, or offer them to every single person equally, part of what makes America great is that it's our sounding call, and that even if we don't live it fully, we're always moving, and our battle cry is freedom. So it's that because human persons are equal, that they should all be entitled to do these outward things, to express themselves, to live their lives. So those are the freedoms that we hopefully enjoy in America. But I'm gonna, and I asked you this in the bell ringer, so we're gonna go to the next bell ringer question. Where is external freedom hindered today? Another way to say that is, where is slavery today, or in what way does slavery exist in today's world. We're going to take this response by response, and make your own list of ways in which slavery exists, which of course is the opposite of freedom. Slavery exists in the form of the criminal justice system. When in prison, you are forced to work for little to no pay. Your right to vote is taken if you are a convicted felon. Imprisonment in the justice system also disproportionately affects African Americans, so it is often seen as modern day slavery. And this person probably watched what other students have watched, the documentary on Netflix about the corruption in the American prison system, and how people can be treated inhumanely there, and that's it's largely recognized in America. The question is, how do you fix that problem? So there's all kinds of problems there. Now, every one of us, I think, can agree on the need for a prison, on the need to detain, confine criminals, but there's a difference between confining them, punishing them, and then dehumanizing them, and to making them a tool, an instrument, or you know, uh, something that is not valued. They don't lose their humanity, right? They don't lose their dignity. So yeah, we can say in our list of slaveries, unjust prison system, a corrupt prison system. Asia, child labor. Child labor, in other words, also referred to as human trafficking. So we've got that. One example of how this happens in Africa is tribes, families kidnapped, forced to, under pain of death, to pan for diamonds, going into rivers and whatnot, and taking these like strainers, colanders, whatever you might call them, through the mud, let it all sift out, and if there's anything of value there, they hand it over to their master, and they get back to work. Interesting movie on that called Blood Diamond. If you're looking for a very thought-provoking video or movie, it's got Leonardo DiCaprio in it. It's pretty legit. There's still slavery in less developed countries. I'm going to tell you what those tally marks on the board mean when we get to the end of it. People in third world countries. People forced to make our clothes or pick our food who get paid very little. And that was the debate I had yesterday with Period 2. Just because you pay somebody, it doesn't mean they're not a slave. We even at your age, you have an idea of how much money you need to survive or to live. And of course, if I were to hire any one of you to pick grapes in my Pale Lady vineyard, and I paid you $2 an hour, that wouldn't get you anywhere. You cannot live off of that. But it happens, and you might say, well, it's not slavery, Mr. Pale, because they're choosing to work there. Well, if they literally have no other options, then there is a sense of slavery. It's not the worst slavery, but it is a true level of slavery, of being captive and stuck in a very impoverished situation and not being treated fairly in that situation. That's a real problem in America and around the world. Ooh. Somebody else said it, not me. I'm putting this on a whole nother list, so don't write it down on your examples of slavery today list. I'm putting this on another list and to come back to it. All right. Racism. And so that's a good image. Of course, the slavery of the African American population in in the southern part of the United States of America. Of course, there's that liberation from via Abraham Lincoln, Emancipation Proclamation. But of course, 100 years later, we have this need for Dr. Martin Luther King to further illustrate that, yes, we were set free, but we are not free. And of course, there's another civil rights movement happening in our day as well. Are people still stuck in situations that are not respectful, or, where they're judged? And there can still exist a social slavery today. So you could put that. Some of you may or may not like this term, but I'm not saying whether it exists or not in America. That's not my job. But systemic racism, whether or not it exists in America, it can exist. It does exist. And that is a form of slavery that still exists today. Sweatshops, people being forced to work for others, people who make clothes, serve food, harvesters, perhaps, yeah. Third world countries. Explicit slavery still exists in countries in Asia and South America. Slavery, in a more metaphorical way, can exist in the struggles of minorities. Okay. Good job. We've largely said that. Sweatshops are examples. We've talked about that. That's human trafficking. Having a housemaid is basically a slave. I don't know about that one. It depends. It depends. I know a couple ladies on my block. I know a couple families in Bro Bridge, and they hire the help. And there's a woman that comes and cleans, and in some cases, she's given a fair wage. But is that person being manipulated? Is that person being given the fair wage? Is that person consenting freely? In the cases that I know of, and this is just one or two, the woman is very, very clear with her employer, the person that pays her, the house owner, that I don't want to do this, and I can only come once a month for you, and because I go other places, blah blah blah. So it could be. You certainly can't say any housemaid. My own sister, when she was newly married, her husband was deployed to, I'm trying to remember what Middle Eastern country he was in. I think Iraq. But he was just like a computer tech guy. He wasn't exactly a sniper. That being said, she just picked up house cleaning for a job to keep busy because she was in a new city. She didn't know anybody, and her husband was gone. And that wasn't slavery, but it could be. It totally. Human trafficking, forced labor, human trafficking, people who do labor in third world countries. Slavery does not exist like it used to, but I believe that people are still racist in some ways. So you recognize that slavery might look different than the shackles and chains that it took, and the human auctions that happened 100, well, maybe more like 200 years ago. Okay, you're the first class to not name the number one form of slavery in the United States of America. You were close, but nobody said it. No other guesses. Nothing that is missing from our list. Yeah. Sex trafficking. What? Okay, now human trafficking is the umbrella. Human trafficking, and this is why it's both different and similar. Human trafficking usually refers to labor, which you did say, and forced labor. That is human trafficking. Some of you might have implied that sex trafficking when you said human trafficking, but in truth, human trafficking is whenever you take somebody and you force them in another scenario. Yes, that would be the umbrella, and sex trafficking would fall under that. But across the world, it's the number one form of slavery is forced labor. Kids being sold, kidnapped to do, factory work largely. Um, there's only one country in the world where sex trafficking is more common and popular than labor trafficking. Any guesses? United States of America. Sex trafficking happens more than you realize, much more than any of us realize, much more than I realize. The stats, which I really should accrue and gather up for y'all, are mind blowing, and they might just be numbers, but my mother-in-law actually works with girls who were sex trafficked, and when they look for help or they've been rescued, she gives them retreats and she tries to teach them about their value and their dignity, and she knows girls in every part, and she just works kind of like within the state of Louisiana. She knows girls in every city, from Shreveport down to Lafayette, and definitely New Orleans. Um, and she knows dozens all over, dozens in Acadiana probably, um, and and that's just the ones we know. That's just the ones that have been rescued. Those are just the ones that ask for help. Sex trafficking is very very common, and it's a real thing. You've seen commercials probably saying, if you see any signs of sex trafficking, please contact so and so, because it is a real scary industry right now that some of the biggest, richest people are a part of. You know, um, if you're familiar with Jeffrey Epstein, largely arrested because what did he do? He had people recruiting, usually young teenage girls, so that he could be with about two or three of them on any given day. Um, one of the wealthiest men in the country. Um, and so he got eventually arrested and then committed suicide in prison before he could testify to his gross crimes. So I bring that to your attention, and that's why I have this tally mark on the board. 6 of you answered this question in a way that you said, "Oh yes, that's far, far away. That's in Africa. That's in Asia. That's in China." And I don't know if anybody said China. Maybe one. And all that is true, and that is there is sex trafficking across the globe, but there's slaves. There's slaves in America. Like they physically are pressured, you know, by it's of course mostly women, but there are young boys that are kidnapped and trafficked for sexual purposes. It's a real thing. If we have time at the end of today's lesson, I'll show you a real life story of what that looks like. Um, but I want you to be aware. Slavery is not far away. Slavery is very present. Um, so here we have a list of 4 things of where slavery exists in the world today. You got the main ones. Um, Often related to racism, there's also the cyclical poverty, whereby a poor person or a poor family does not have the resources to get out of it. We often think that there's free education and there's welfare in the United States of America, like they should be able to work their way out of it, and that's just not the case. A lot of families don't have um, the resources and the awareness of how to do that. Um, Most people are set up in life where they're not expected or encouraged to do anything other than work at McDonald's, and that is like the only job that they can really apply for. Um, and so that's a real that could be a slavery to a system. Okay, very good. So we got a list of exterior limitations, exterior slavery, and that all suggests that you know These things, of course, are not good. We should be free. But that, my friends, is only the base level understanding of freedom. If that's your only understanding of freedom, then we have to look at the world with different eyes. And so the Catechism goes on here to expand on what is true freedom. Now, it says freedom is ordered in a certain way for our growth and maturity. It's a force for growth and maturity in truth and goodness. So we have this freedom so that we can go do good things, that we can live as God wanted us to in the truth. It attains its perfection, and your freedom is fulfilled when you use it to guide your life and your soul back to God, our beatitude. You remember that term? God, our happiness, God, our fulfillment. This, when you can experience the desire to choose God and to love God, and I want to do the right thing. I'm not bound by anything. I can commit to living a good life in all areas. What you experience is what we're going to call internal/interior freedom. And this is why I put phones. Somebody in class said we're slaves to our phones. Deep, brilliant insight. I think there was only one person. All your answers were good, you know. But this person looked at slavery not as shackles and bonds and outward limitations, but inward limitations. You know, I had a student in class yesterday when I mentioned the social media challenge I put forth for Lent to give up social media for Lent. I had a student say yesterday she could never do that because she wouldn't know what to do with all that time if she gave up social media. She said she spent so much time on social media she wouldn't have anything else to do. You know, we've become dependent on our smartphones so much so that it could, of course, do damage. We could be slaves to that gratification. If you can have screen addiction, you know, that if you're not looking at a screen for X amount of minutes, you start to feel uncomfortable. You know, even it's a real thing to be concerned about. Um, you know, and it increases our anxiety because there's always something happening on our phone, right? And all these things. So we can be slaves to this. What other things can enslave us on the inside? We're answering this question. Should pull up. Ways in which a person is not able to do the good thing. So, in the case of the phones, which is the only thing we have on this interior slavery list, a person is not capable of having quality human connection apart from a digital conversation. True story, when I was in college, I was friends with the RD, the resident director, which is basically like the person in charge of the college dorm. And this person was a wonderful Catholic woman, and she had a fuss at a kid in the dorm for how he was acting. I don't know the issue. I don't know the person even. But I was talking to her, and she goes, I couldn't believe what just happened. She's telling him, listen, I need you to do this. I need you to stop doing that. Do we understand? And the guy just left the meeting peacefully but quickly. Didn't say anything. Went up to his room and typed out an email to her. You know, wasn't able to have that face-to-face conversation. I was at a conference for teachers at STM a couple of years ago, and this STM teacher told the story of a kid who was supposed to be taking a test on the laptop. I forget exactly what the problem was, that maybe the laptop wasn't charged. I don't think that was it. I think he didn't remember his login information to go on and take the test. Okay. Um, Teacher doesn't realize that he's not taking the quiz or the test. And at the end of the hour, with like 5 minutes left, says, like, what's going on? You haven't taken your test. And the student said, oh, yeah, I didn't know what to do. And so the kid, what the kid do is sat in his desk for an hour because of this inability to go tell an adult. And I don't find this too much at Turlings. There's some of y'all, but I think most of y'all are very well raised in your communication and relationships with adults. But this kid just said, oh, I didn't know what to do. It's like, well, you have a teacher. That's why you have a teacher to guide you and help you figure that out. So it's like that inability that your generation, maybe even my generation, is experiencing, in the face-to-face dialogue and communication is not good. Y'all, as a generation, y'all don't have those skills so much. We have to talk through a screen, or we're uncomfortable, right? There's a limitations we put there because we're living in a digital world. And that, of course, hinders relations. So that's a slavery, okay, that we have. We're not able to do the good thing, the polite thing, the responsible thing, because we don't know how to function all the time. What other things can you be a slave to on the inside? And that nobody's got shackles and bonds, nobody's got a restraining order against you, but you are yet a slave, in a sense, to yourself. Who might qualify for this category? Nothing. Nobody. I'm trying to figure out if you can have an insight into people who are slaves to themselves. What kind of person is unable, looking at the notes here, unable to do the good thing? They know the good thing. They may even want to do the good thing, but they can't. Okay. Mental illness. There might be an interior slavery. Now, that is illness. So there's much often out of that person's control. But that's a good insight. A person can be a slave and hindered by a mental illness. What? A famous person. What might a famous person be a slave to? Say what? The people that like him. And they got to get likes, and they got to get followers, and they got to hold up this reputation, and they got to make news waves. So what would they be? Fill in the blank. Celebrities are often slaves to yeah, you could say media, you could say attention, their reputation, which for a celebrity, they've got the world looking at them, maybe the country looking at them. But you experience this too. Why? Because you have an entire high school looking at you. Turlings is small enough where you mostly know everybody, and you certainly know the big popular people. But sometimes the big popular people, and we've probably talked about this before, are just slaves. Like, they have to do this. They're expected to do that at the party, and they do all this, whether it's for friends, for attention. They're a slave because they will do whatever it takes to be liked. And I'm not saying every popular person is like that. Some unpopular people are like that, and you're trying to be cool, and you're trying to fit in, and you are a slave to the way people see you. You know, it's something we can all fall into. We judge ourselves and we run our lives based on other people's, how they look at us. Very good. That was a good insight. Any others? Any other slaveries that, without giving the class your own personal confession, I cannot do this good thing because anybody that suffers from any addiction, call it drugs, call it alcohol, call it pornography, call it sex. Addiction is, you know, is a real issue. Whether or not the person's actually responsible for their addiction is one thing or another. But I've known some very, very wealthy people. In my life, living very, very, very miserable lives because they need to have a lot of whiskey when they wake up in the morning. It's their breakfast, it's their lunch, and it's their dinner, and it's just it's a sad lifestyle to be addicted to something. I cannot have good relationships. I cannot function at full capacity without doing damage to my body. There's this interior slavery that comes with any addiction, the gambling addict, not free in America, land of the free, home of the brave. But if we're addicted to things that we live our life to party, so we get addicted to the drugs and alcohol. We live our life to make a lot of money. You can get addicted to gambling there. All these things, and I could go on. We're slaves on the inside to ourselves. And I want you to be aware of that. Last chapter, I asked you, what makes you happy? And do you think God is your true source of happiness in your life? This chapter, I want you to ask yourself, am I truly free? What binds me on the inside? All of you are, of course, good law-abiding Americans. You're all free. But are you free? Are you truly free? Do you have anything on this list? Most of you probably do. Statistically, I would say 70% of you do. 70% of you. 50% of you boys are already addicted to pornography. About 10 to 20% of you are addicted to alcohol. And then there's vaping. Very addictive. I've had students confess, not sacramentally, but just kind of admit to me of all the above in my years here. It is binding, and we need to be in tune to it. And this brings me to your bell ringer, where Jesus says, y'all are slaves, basically. And some Jewish people say, you can't call us slaves. We're children of Abraham. We've never been enslaved to anybody, which historically is completely false. But Jesus doesn't even address that historical falsity. He simply says, if you sin, you're a slave to sin. But if you continue in my word, if you follow me, if you love God and you love your neighbor, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And then you're truly free. If you know and can follow Jesus, you're free. There's that story that some of you may be familiar with. Jesus looks at the rich young man. He says, if you really want to be perfect, if you really want a relation with God, Jesus calls him, leave everything, sell it all, give it away, and come follow me. And the man went away sad. The man wasn't free to follow Jesus because the money, the cars, and all the houses in the world had too much of a capacity in his heart. He was a slave to materialism. You could add that to your list of interior things that enslave us. The truth shall set you free, John 8:31 and 32. So what we're going to round out today's lesson with three relatively short slides to add to this list of things on the inside that don't allow us to live a full, radiant, abundant, I'm so happy and free to be alive kind of thing. Concupiscence. Even if you, of course, can know the truth and you want to do the truth and you say, I'm never going to commit that sin again, you're going to be tempted. And we continually have this tendency to do the wrong things. And so we call that concupiscence. Here is Dory with her ADD. And she says, I firmly resolve to sin no more. Okay, I'm going to be good. And then we're all just like Dory spiritually, just ADD. And look, concupiscence. Okay, never mind. I'm going to go do it again this weekend, and I'm going to do it again. And we have this just ongoing struggle.
Hey, can I see Ashton's on it?
Sure. Yeah. And so that's why some of y'all during this Lent have given things up. That's why some of y'all are making efforts to get in charge of your soul. Sometimes our bodily desires get, they make our soul sick. Just a quick second. They make our soul sick. And so you give up your dessert, you give up your fast food, you give up your soft drinks. Why? So that you can get in control of that concupiscence. And when you have a tendency to do wrong, you're stronger in your soul. So that's a hindrance that we all have to being truly free on the inside. So, of course, to be aware of that is very important. Okay, good. Number 2 is ignorance. Jesus says, if you know the truth, you'll be free, which means that if you live a life of lies and you don't know who you are, you don't know who made you, you don't know what you're living for, then what is that? You know? So that's ignorance. And I have this picture here. Remember, I get all these pictures from Google Images. I just type in ignorance, and this picture came up. I was like, oh, it's pretty good. We live in these boxes that I was raised this way. I know this thing. I know these one things, and I'm not going to listen to other people. I'm not going to expand my ideas. I'm not going to try to, of course, engage other people. There's this ignorance that so many of us live in. And I think, unfortunately, our phones allow us. You would think our phones, where we have all this access to all this information, unfortunately, we program our phones to only give us the information that we want, that agrees with our viewpoints of the world. And so we largely remain closed-minded and unopen to learning or to new ideas. So we remain a slave to these, and maybe what we know is good and true, but if we don't allow ourselves to see that in the bigger picture, we remain ignorant. We commit sins perhaps out of ignorance. Oh, I didn't know that was a sin. Okay. But are you asking, are you evaluating whether or not it is good or Jesus would do it? I'm amazed every year at the high schoolers who tell me, I had no idea, Mr. Pale, it was a sin to get drunk. You know, it boggles my mind. I mean, that there's so many passages in the Bible about why that is wrong and how that's wrong and how it's viewed in God's eyes. But this ignorance that, I just thought it was, being dumb. As long as you don't drive drunk, then you're, that's a sin. Yeah, Mr. Pale, but no. In truth, it does damage to a person's soul in multiple ways. Let alone, what do you do when you are drunk? A lot of issues there, of course. So, a person's going to do damage to themselves and their friends the more and more they experience that drunken behavior. Ignorance puts these limitations on us. This is a Bible passage I want you to know, at least the first line. God says through the prophet Hosea, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And God is speaking through Hosea, trying to wake his people up, saying, y'all don't even know me anymore. You don't know the commandments anymore. And frankly, it's not that your hearts are bad, but you're not illumined. You don't have access to the truth. And so you're just continually destroyed and hurting yourselves, and you're not going to be able to defeat your enemies if you don't know the truth. So hopefully you can be thankful for a Catholic education. Yes, you have to take this class, this religion class, when your public school friends do not. But if it helps you to understand the big picture, it could be everything. And then the last one is probably the most common one. And that is fear. Fear of consequences. We cling to our sin so tightly. Oh, there's a typo in this slide. I got to fix it. I'll do that after class. There's this fear that we cling so tightly and struggle to see ourselves apart from it. Oh my gosh, I'm so afraid that if I tell my boyfriend what I'm actually thinking, then he'll dump me. Or that I'll lose all my friends. So I'm going to just keep dating this guy. Or I'm so afraid of what my parents will say if I actually tell them the truth. Listen, your parents are probably going to be pissed off, but you have to tell them the truth to move forward in your relationship with them. These fears. And so I think the reason why so many people lie, and it's very common for high schoolers to just, I call them chronic liars, to just everything is a lie to everybody. There's just this fear of if people actually knew me, they wouldn't like me. It's a sad life. But this picture of this image of fear on the board is you of course don't see this in real life, but this is how people live. Like, oh no. And it's difficult. And maybe somebody hurt you real bad. It's probably the case. Or maybe you don't have reason to trust other people. And that's hard and that's sad. But to be able to work through that, to be able to identify that and move past it. Otherwise, you're going to make a lot of sins out of fear. Once again, perhaps out of for your reputation and for all the consequences that come with it. So hopefully you have a bigger understanding of freedom. It's not just doing things. First, when it comes to external freedom, I want you to recognize that slavery is very real still in America. It just looks very different exteriorly. But then examine yourself if you are truly free to do good things. You know what's right and wrong. You've been raised pretty well. But do you feel pressured by anything, anybody? That falls into the internal slavery category. All right. So that's the end of lesson one, both parts. And that's all we have to cover today.